Are today. People that have helped us with our growth here within Osborne that we'd like to recognize this month are Rhodey Vare and Kelly Kesterson Walker. And finally, relationships. When we talk about relationships, we say that we move forward together through caring and collaboration. And the people that we're identifying as exemplifying these relationships this month here within Osborne are Lisa Nye, and Abby Potter Davis. When we've awarded this, we've had certificates and we've also had lapel pins that had the different points of pride. We just ordered some lapel pins with our crest. It says Osborne School District and it has the 5 core values wrapped around it. You've probably seen that graphic that Brendan Stacy made for us. And so we'll be getting those lapel pins. But thank you, and I'll come out and give these certificates now. And board members, that's it for our celebrations today. I believe we're going to pause.
Yeah, we'll take a short recess. We'll reconvene at 6:05. Let's calling the meeting back to order. And on the consent agenda, there's been a request to pull item J6. So we'll move that to the regular agenda on item 8 for action item.
Or we can just do the rest of the consent agenda and then do that item right after the consent agenda. Works.
Okay, let's do that. And then there is a modification to the minutes from July 12th, 2022, changing the heading of the minutes to read the Osborne School District's instructional time model public hearing began at 5:31 p.m. and 4 members of the governing board were present. So with that clarification, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda except for item J6?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, looking at item J6, approval of lease agreement with Phoenix Union High School District.
And this, I just wanted to pull it real quick. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I know we approved this back in March 22nd, and so I was just wondering, just to get a bit of background of what happened since we approved it since March 22nd, and why is it coming back to us now? It looks like
Sure.
slightly different. I didn't go line through
Slightly
line.
different, yeah. So there are a couple changes. You did approve this back in of March, I believe it was March 22nd.
22nd.
Of this year, with a rental rate from February 22 through June 23. And there were the terms of the lease that were written there. Those terms, in order for the contract to be ratified, needs to be approved by both the governing board of Osborne School District as well as the governing board of Phoenix Union High School District. PXU didn't approve. They had some issues with timeliness of issues that they may have seen within the building that they wanted to kind of get wrapped up before they got into a lease agreement long-term, just making sure that as renters, that if there were concerns that they had about any work orders or anything that they needed to get done, that there was a good process in place for that. So we've been going back and forth with their our council working with their district council on what that agreement is, on exactly what the process will be. If there's a work order that they wanted to get done. Some of the concerns may be they of course have a huge staff, right? And a larger maintenance staff than we have, and they may have had concerns about something within the building and wanting to bring their staff. Well, we can't have that, so we needed to say you can't make improvements or modifications to our building, even if you've got the staff or capacity, without going through the proper channels. And so we needed to iron out, what is that going to look like? What does a work order request look like? What's the expected time of completion of that project? What if our capacity to complete that within your hopeful time frame isn't met? What would kind of, maybe they are able to bring in someone of their own, but we would want to make sure that that's done before, in consultation with our maintenance department, all of those types of things. So it took us a little back and forth, but we finally got it all ironed out, what exactly that process will look like. And so that's some revisions in the language of the contract. Additionally, there's a change in the rental rate. What you approved back in March was for a rental rate of $4,930 a month from February 22 all the way through June 23. There's been a modification of that to have that rental rate of $4,930 a month go from February and expired in June, on June 30th. And effective July 1, a higher rate of $5,256 a month is the new rate. So
I think that's still for that square footage is still probably a steal.
it is. It is.
definitely
And
steal.
we also recognize that number one, we're working with one of our district partners, and there's different levels of pricing that we go through. There's in-kind services, which is how we have done some rentals over at Montecito, where extensive numbers of rooms, I think up to 7. How many classrooms do they have now? 14? or 16?
Yeah, 16 Phoenix Union.
Yeah,
They
so
have
they're,
the entire upstairs.
right, so there's 16 rooms, the entire upstairs plus, I believe, 1 or 2 rooms downstairs. You know, we've had an agreement over the past 5 years or so with about 7 rooms at a rate, you know, that instead of paying rent, there was in-kind services that were provided in the amount of about $18,000. If you look at what real estate rentals for or commercial real estate rental would be, of course we could get a much higher price for an external member that wanted to rent. We recognize that, and by closing off that entire wing, doesn't allow for that rental. However, I gotta say, we didn't have the entire upstairs of Montecito rented out. It's been unused since 2011. So yes, we could get a much higher rental rate, you know, up there, but the $40,000 to $50,000 annually that we have been able to bring in, maybe it's 35, I don't know, Colleen, if you've got the exact dollar amounts, we can get that. But we have that, you know, in place now and can secure that that rental amount, and we can use that for different needs within the district. It's not a significant amount, like, you know, commercially the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we may be able to at a regular commercial real estate rental price. But we're not getting that. We haven't been for the past 11 years, and we've got a district partner that we're doing a solid with. You know, we're giving them a very good rate. It's a fantastic rate that I'm sure that they're very happy for and appreciative, and you know, we do a lot of work with the district. We've got a really good partnership that we're starting up to be able to offer geometry classes to our kids by having them brought over to Central High School. So, you know, there's really good things that we're doing with PXU, and I'd like to, you know, maintain that partnership by extending this lease for the next year. But there were some, number one, some financial numbers that needed to change for these 12 months, as well as the changes in the language around resolution of conflict that may arise around timeliness of work orders.
I know that I think you've still been talking with, you know, potential partners to get even more money, you know, higher rental rates. Is approving this going to affect that in any way, or is it affect the timing of
No.
that in any way?
No, it does not. In
Okay.
fact, I look forward, board, over the next month or so of bringing forth a potential partnership at Montecito for you to consider a long-term rental. But they're not looking to get in until the termination of this
Okay.
lease, so it wouldn't affect that.
All right, great. There's no other questions.
One follow-up question. This Exhibit C, is this sort of the mechanism that will be used? Is the expectation that Phoenix Union will do its own repairs and its
No.
own? No?
Let me, and Colleen, you may want to, you've been intimately involved in this entire process over the past 5 months. I
That
gotta
Exhibit
look up the-
C is a template to be used if the district chooses to use Phoenix Union's staff resources to perform any of the necessary work repairs in the building. That's the template that will be used to then have Phoenix Union invoice the district for then reimbursement of their staff's time. We did not want to apply any possible service hours that Phoenix Union staff may do work performance in the building towards the rent rate. We wanted to make sure that those funding sources were separate. As we have our maintenance and operations budget that typically we fund our repairs from, we didn't want it to be applied to discounted rental rates, knowing that rental rates in this lease are already fairly discounted as is, so.
Thank you.
Okay, I move that we approve the lease agreement with Phoenix Union High School District.
Motion's been made. Any second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is call to the public. Have there been any requests to address the governing board?
No, none.
Thank you. Then we will go on to the board presentation, which I have been eagerly anticipating, which is the presentation from district employees participating in the Fulbright programs to Brazil and Finland earlier this year.
We're super fortunate to have been invited to participate in a couple programs over the past year, where we get to be part of a global learning community, and have us go out and bring what we do here within our district to others, as well as learn from others and be able to bring that back for the benefit of teachers, students, staff here. The first group of individuals were part of a program, a Fulbright Hayes program to Porto Alegre, Brazil, which shares similarities as a cross-border region between southern Brazil and northern Argentina, very similar to the cross-border situation that we have here, sharing a border with Mexico. So researchers at ASU that are very familiar with this area and with wanting to study these cross-border studies and similarities, wanted to bring teams of educators from selected districts, and they selected Osborne and Phoenix Union High School District. As part of that, there was a long application and selection for Osborne School District members to be able to go and spend a month in Brazil this past summer. So we welcome Luis Valencia, Maria Green, Jessica Dodge, and Beth Anderson to present to us about their Fulbright Hayes in Brazil.
We're going to kick things off with just a fun video of a photo collage of our trip. I'm sure we could spend many minutes here.
For the sake of the online audience, would you mind speaking to the mic? Thank you.
We're going to start our evening off with just sharing some video footage and photographs of our trip. It was truly a blessing to be on this trip and to network with Phoenix Union and the district employees as well. So enjoy our little collage here, and then we'll be happy to share some takeaways, important takeaways from the trip as well. There is sound, but that's okay. Thank you very much. I'm sure you can tell from that video that there was a lot of aspects of the trip, and we were fed well, and learned so much. I mean, the cultural diversity that we were immersed in within that southern region of Brazil. I don't think, most of us, when we think of Brazil, we think of a few things in mind, but we learned so much more, and it was just really a beautiful trip. So we had just a couple of takeaways we wanted to share with you guys.
This is a Escola Adolfina. It's a school that is a public school that has an outstanding performance, and they won an award. I think it's $50,000 or something like that. And that's the school that we visit, and we were amazed with the organization, all the art on the walls. They were very welcoming. This is a private school that we visit. It's a Colegio Israelita Brasileiro. It's a private school. Amazing environment. The students were fantastic and very impressive. Go ahead.
This is one of the universities that we went to. It's called PUCI, Pontifical Catholic University of Rio Grande do Sul. This was our home university that we visited. They took us in. We were able to use their rooms and their Wi-Fi, and we learned a lot about how students are able to learn about or get their education there. It's very different than how we do things here. They don't have a lot of public programs for the students to get funded. There's not a lot of transportation in the schools. So it was interesting to see how they try to reach out to the communities that are not affluent, and they're working on getting better resources to support them. And then on the right side, Southern Brazil is very, they view themselves as cowboys, and they don't necessarily view themselves as Brazilian. So we learned a little bit about a different culture, the Gaucho culture. And so this is the laçador, the main leader, and so that is very popular in southern Brazil.
And the Champagnat school is the school that has from I think preschool to all the way to the middle school, high school. It's close to the university. It's a Catholic school, very impressive playground and everything. So it's the Colegio Marista. This is the last meal that we had all together. Very traditional churrascaria, the traditional cuts, meats that all the Brazilians love. Barranco is a very traditional place to eat there.
So my takeaways were that the people here with me, as well as Sean Conway, were really, they showed that we could thrive and collaborate and support each other in an environment that was different to us and different than how we thought it was going to be when we were all together. We also learned that, I took away that the Brazilian people were extremely hospitable, and they were excited to have us there. They were willing to support us when our Portuguese and Spanish fell short. Things that I learned and observed in the schools was that teachers had to work in 2 or 3 different schools in order to make a living. Also, students only attend schools for a couple hours a day just due to the population and lack of schools available. We also observed that slavery is not really acknowledged in the south of Brazil. They don't really want to talk about it, and they don't like to discuss that how it impacts the people today. A lot of the schools are working on how they make people of color and Black Lives Matter really powerful and impactful there. And then we also just really enjoyed our time there. And so it was interesting to see where things needed to improve, but then we also got to see really awesome things in the schools. So thank you for letting me go.
Can we go back to the, we had the opportunity to visit outside the city. This is a park. It's a national park. It's called the Cachoeiras, which means the waterfalls. We did a hike for 4 of the waterfalls. We wanted to do all, but we couldn't do it all in one day. It was very challenging, but we had a very good time. We had the opportunity to see the plants and even monkeys, and we were right there in nature. That's we wanted to see from Brazil, that part of Brazil.
All right, so I think my biggest takeaway was the commonalities that we could find within a culture that was so far away, over 5,900 miles away from home. And I just kind of took away the simple things and the big things as well. But I thought it was really cute that they took some English words and they just added, with their language, they would just add e's to the end of it. So drink would become drinky. So I loved hearing the language and the similarities there. Being bilingual myself, churrascaria barbecue. The barbecue style was just very cool, very conversational, and just truly something that anyone could enjoy if they were coming from one culture to another. If you're going to travel there during the same time we did, make sure you got some boots and an umbrella because it was quite rainy during that season. And I really, really valued being able to check in with the heavy influence of European immigration there and the influences that Germans, Italians, French, Spanish, and Portuguese all played a part in the small community that we were in, and kind of helped me connect to my own lineage as well, which was interesting and nothing I expected from visiting a town south of Brazil. Some things that you kind of take for granted where you come from, and then when you're going somewhere, of course, the value of money changes. It was probably $6 to $8 for every humongous meal that we were able to have. And meals are surrounded by conversation. So we sat for about 2 to 3 hours, some meals, just eating and talking about the food and talking about culture and language and networking with each other, Phoenix Union, with the universities that we partnered down there with. So there was just very meaningful memories that we were able to take away from that trip.
The first picture with Luis and Sean and Beth is the day before we were going to come back, we got invited to a Gremio soccer game. They won. And it was a very amazing experience because the fans, they love soccer, is in their blood, and that was very exciting to see that. This is a very famous street. It's called Rua Gonzalo de Carvalho, and they consider this one of the most beautiful streets in the world because it's all green. The other one is at sunset from the Megapista da Orla. It's a park. Everybody goes there and relaxes, etc. It's one of the most beautiful sunsets I have seen. And my takeaway was the people, how the Brazilian people live. I think they have very good spirits. They are very optimistic. They live the moment. They don't stress out about the future too much. They very approachable, friendly. They have good sense of humor, especially with us that we were trying to speak the language, and sometimes they was difficult, but they were patient and they help. The things that I learned is that teachers in Brazil work very hard, just like us. And, the private schools, of course, are amazing, but the public schools have several limitations, but they still have educate the children, and I saw lots of happy faces there. So no teachers complaining. Teachers were just talking about reality, but not in a bad way. So, it was a very good opportunity for me to collaborate. I was approached by the coordinator of the Escola Adolfina if I wanted to participate and exchange. And I think we're gonna continue doing a cultural exchange between the two schools, Longview and her school.
Hello. Yes, summarizing everything that we had lots of takeaways. When we think of Brazil, we always think, dances, carnival, beaches, and just partying all the time. The part that we were in Brazil looks very different. It is very serious, and people think about the economy, and they're very concerned about the look. How do people look? How does the southern part of Brazil looks to the world? And they want to present a different view. The tourism that we saw was local tourism or South American tourism. A lot of people asked us, like, you came from the US here? Why are you here? How you should be at Rio, you should be somewhere else. But when we talked to them that we were there because we were learning about the education system and the universities and the public schools, then the perception changed, like, oh yeah, we are the best part of Brazil and we have the best education. And it was so refreshing to see that even though many of the schools that we visited had very limited resources, they had so much pride in what they were doing. They're like, yeah, we're doing this and we have this and everything. And I looked around and it's like, wow, we have so much more. We can do so much more. So that connection between, having proud with having so little and us having many resources and not realizing how much we have and how much, we can achieve, that was really eye-opening. And not everybody likes soccer. I approached many people, like, what's your favorite team? It's like, I don't follow soccer. It's like, what? You're in Brazil. This is the capital of soccer. But it was a big takeaway. And just overall, just people were welcoming when they realized we were, coming from America. They have this perception that America and Europe is so much better than everything else in the world. So a lot of places, they just embrace the American culture. Like you go to the markets and you see pictures of Iron Man and Batman and Superman and artists, doing that. And the buildings, the architecture is so based on in Europe. And they just want to have start a brand new place. It's like the old Brazil was good, but we're gonna make it better by being like other places. And that was very different than the perception that we have in the southern part of the United States, sharing a border with Mexico. We're all about, let's build a wall, let's keep people out. But in the southern part of Brazil, it's like, no, well, let's bring people in because not a lot of people are coming in. But let's bring a certain type of people so we can just build this great place where people want to come, where people want to invest, because we need to reinvent the country. And that's the whole philosophy. It's like southern Brazil is not Brazil, even though they're part of Brazil. So a lot of takeaways, it's just a lot of eye-opening experiences. We really enjoyed and the camaraderie that we had and sharing and playing cards with Beth at night, in the evenings and sharing a stroll and going for dinner with Jessica or going on a boat ride with Maria. It was just a lot of great experiences. So we're just really thankful and grateful that we were given this opportunity, and we really hope that other people get the same chance that we had because we really had a great experience. Just bring some translators with us next time. That will really help. But thank you very much.
Any questions, members?
No, thank you for the experience. I'm sure it sounds like it was a very eye-opening experience. Appreciate you sharing it with us, and I hope it kind of helps drive you through the school year, and I'm sure it's an experience you'll remember for the rest of your lives. So thank you for doing it. Thank you.
Please, or Sue? No. I have a couple questions, comments. I was intrigued by the topic about how slavery is perceived in Brazil. Reminds me of Puerto Rico. in that, and this might be sort of more broad-based in terms of Latin American countries, how it is sort of, yeah, it is kind of brushed aside. Oh, that was in the past. It's not, we don't have a race problem anymore, even though in Puerto Rico we definitely do. Um, was there, was it just not discussed, but openly? And if, and what techniques, if any, or strategies did you find educators use to broach the subject?
So in the public, they don't talk about it at all.
Okay.
In the private schools, they have more freedom to discuss their curriculum.
Okay.
In certain cities such as Pelotas, we were on a tour with a historian PhD guide, and the whole tour was supposed to show us the city which had one of the worst slavery plantations in Brazil. And she wasn't even allowed to discuss how slavery impacted people. We were the second tour, that she was able to have any conversations about it. Even though everything we went to was like, oh, this is where slaves were flogged, this is where things happened. And so they're trying to get like policies passed in order to have the freedom to talk about it, but there's still a lot of like room like to grow, and they're fighting hard for it.
Okay, thank you. And having had the privilege of traveling a fair amount over the world, it's always eye-opening to go to a different culture, and even culture that's probably somewhat close-ish to, has some European and African roots, in Brazil, and Native American, still different, and it's such a valuable instrumental tool to create awareness about how different we are. And I am grateful that you guys had the opportunity. I don't know if you guys had been able to travel internationally before, but I'm glad you guys had the opportunity, and now the ability to share that wider perspective with our students. So thank you very much for that. Probably amazing experience, but also sacrifice being away from your family. No? All right. Hey, I get it. But thank you for that commitment.
Second part of the presentation, and I've got an hour-long presentation that I'm going to try and do in 5 minutes. There's no way I'm going to take the full amount of time. Back in 2020, I was supposed to participate in the Fulbright Leaders for Global Schools program. It's an invitation of 8 to 10 administrators from the United States to visit the school systems in either Finland or Singapore. So those of us that were applying applied to either work with the go and visit Finnish schools or visit Singaporean schools. And so I applied for the program in Finland. There were 8 of us that were on that trip, 8 administrators. And so we went to, some of the things you're going to hear are so different than what their experience was like. Go ahead, Brendan. On the trip, among the 8 leaders, there were 3 of us that were superintendents, and so Kristen Rickey from Iowa and Rick Surrency from Florida. He's actually already given this presentation at a conference. And he, there's a video recording from me and a few video spots from Kristen that are embedded in the presentation. He's doing a presentation actually in, I think, about 5 weeks at a National Superintendents Forum that I'm going to be participating in virtually. And then in February, the Superintendents Organization, AASA, we're all AASA members, and so we're going to be presenting our travels at the national conference in February. You can head on to the next slide. Skip that. The goal of the Fulbright Finland Foundation is to empower people to try and find solutions by crossing borders and crossing bridges and bringing our experiences and our expertise together so that they can learn from us and we can learn from them. Can go on ahead and a little perspective. There we are in red in the United States. Finland and far northern Europe is up there in blue. Quite a large piece of land, about the size of Germany, but with a population of about 5 million. So, Germany, just to give you an idea, has about 46 million people. So 5 million people live in that huge amount of space there in Finland. That's about the population of Manhattan, the borough of Manhattan itself, or almost Arizona. We're at about 6,000, 7,000. So just a little perspective. Go on ahead and we spent a lot of time talking about history. This is a nation that is very aware of their history and the impact of its history on systems. They're a new nation. They have been under rule, under control of others for a very long time. Under Sweden, forever. Under Russian control for a good amount of time. And right there at the beginning of World War I is when the Republic of Finland was established. So they're just over 100 years of independence. But that independence is not free of their past. The official languages are both Finnish and Swedish. So in schools, the kids are all at least bilingual. They'll have classes in Finnish and Swedish, as well as English as well, and many other languages. It's not an uncommon thing for kids to be fluent in 5, 6 languages. You can go on ahead onto the next slide. So why Finland? Why did I choose Finland, and why are people paying attention to Finland? Well, there's an index of the world, like a happiness index. And believe it or not, for the past number of years, Finland has come across as the happiest nation on earth. And when it's not Finland, it's like Denmark or Sweden. Like it's that region that is getting high marks. And so we had to ask the Finns, like, so what makes you so happy? And they said, that's such an American word. We don't consider ourselves the happiest people, but we are the most content people. And I'm like, well, talk to us about that difference. And they said, well, it's not like I love you and big hugs. And in fact, we're very standoffish as a nation, but our needs are taken care of. And so when your basic needs are taken care of, not just mine, all of our basic needs are taken care of, then you can be quite content. On to the next slide. Not Kristen, we'll move on to this one. The other reason, the main reason why the visit to Finland, educational tourism has been huge over the past 15 years. Ever since the PISA exams, it's an international exam, math, science, reading, that started, I think, in 2000 is when the PISA exams started. And in the year 2006, exams were taken, and lo and behold, up at the top, the number one nation, very much unexpected, was Finland. And people were asking the question, why Finland? What's going on there? Let's figure out what they've got. And of course, the way we approach things, we meaning the rest of the world that aren't Finns, approach these types of things as what can we do to go there, grab it, and bring it back so that we can replicate it, right? They didn't expect to be first in the world. It was not only unexpected, they could quite frankly care less. Since then, they're no longer the number one nation in the world, but even in the most recent PISA exams, they're still very high. They may be like 5th or 6th, and they're definitely among the top European nations. They're not touching neighbors, but just closest besides Norway or besides Sweden is Estonia. Estonia is really high among European nations as well. Let's go on ahead to the next slide. Yeah, that's just showing more recent. There are a few nations that are ahead of Finland, but they're still very high and much higher than the United States is. That's not a full listing. That just kind of shows some. So American educators have been visiting Finland for the past 10 years, trying to figure out what are they doing there and how do we get to be number one. So while there, what we were there for was to understand the Finnish education system and to bring school leaders together to understand through visitations to schools. We visited the teacher prep programs at the universities, and we also were able to speak with municipal leaders because things are very centralized. Instead of the idea of school districts, it's the municipality of Helsinki, the municipality of Espoo. It's very much around the city government that where these funds are coming from. In Finland, they're very proud of the idea that there are not dead ends in their education system, that everyone's taken care of, and that it's a free education system from once the compulsory ages begin at age 7, all the way through the university. You can go to school for free. There are not private schools in Finland. There may be some, but they're very, very, very few and far between. There's no need for them. They don't want there to be private schools. Very, very, very. When I say few, I mean like few. Count them on your hand. The general system is what they refer to as basic education in those elementary years up through middle school, and then there's a point where you're applying for the next school that you're going to go to, and kids, right around at the age of 10th grade, they make a big decision on whether or not they're going to go to upper secondary, which is a preparation for university studies, or if they're going to go into vocational schools. And so the goal is when they finish their secondary career, we talk about college and career ready. They do college and career ready. If you're not going to college, you're ready for a career, not because we're preparing you to go to maybe make the decision to go to a trade school at the end of high school. That's what their high school is. There's academics that go along with that so that you have the academic skills, reading, writing, math, historical knowledge, but also partnerships with businesses in the neighborhood so that you're learning the skills for what you're going to go out and do in the world. But even if you go on to a certain track, you can still, even if you've gone to the vocational secondary school, you can still go to the traditional universities. There's that opportunity. So there aren't these dead ends. On to the next slide. We're not going to turn and talk. There's an idea, a concept in Finland that's referred to as sisu. We try and find words. There's not an American translation to it, but it's kind of like a grit, determination. It's kind of their philosophy on looking on life. And the CEO of the Fulbright Finland Foundation, on the very last day, we're talking, she was, kind of summing up sisu and what it meant and how that related to all that we were doing in visiting the schools. And she said, this was when we had flown up to the northern part of Finland. So this is someone's footage from flying over. And she was like, you've flown over this vast country. You're up here in the northern part of the country where it's cold, cold, bitter cold. We don't have resources. We don't have these things that we can sell to the world to make money. What we have in Finland is nature. We have one another, and we have education. And so they've made a decision. In fact, like in the 70s, they kind of came to a head. They were not one of those top nations. They had to make a decision. What are we going to do? Kind of like we came and had a nation at risk and thought about what are we going to do with education? And so we decided to compete our way to the top. They did the absolute opposite. They are floored by the questions about excellence that Americans have whenever we go there. Excellence is the least of their concerns. Equity is their concern. They want to make sure that those basic needs that everyone has. So if there were to be a private school, they are also, I mean, me being from Arizona too, they just couldn't believe this land that I live in and this idea of school choice. And they said, well, we believe in school choice. Parents have choices of schools here, but no matter which school they choose, they're going to get the same thing. Because that's the goal. It's not for anyone to be above anyone else. I asked about, like, where do the wealthiest people live? Because I couldn't see opulence. And they were like, well, that's to have your home show how much money you have would just be bragging. The idea of introducing myself as Dr. such and such, they would never do that. They call their teachers by their first names because they're people, right? Like there's nothing that elevates you above when you're working for a common goal. So when we go to nations and think we want to pick up their system and bring it here, it's impossible. We don't share the same values, as a nation. So I talked in our opening meeting about trust and cooperation. These are big words that I heard over and over and over in Finland. We can't just trust and cooperate our way to things here in Osborne. It starts from the community, trusting in the schools. We are far from that in Arizona. We're far from that in this nation. Go on to the next slide. And on. And skip over me. And skip over that. I mean, I've kind of skipped over Kristen. I've kind of gotten into this. I don't want to belabor things. A couple interesting things about the school day itself. Number one, there aren't pacing guides. They know what the curriculum is, and they're going to let kids develop at their pace. And if someone's not reading by the end of such and such grade, they're not worried because they're probably a good way along the way to literacy. They're going to get it. We're going to give them the help. We're not going to let them not learn how to read. But we're not going to say that it's the end all be all to have to be reading by the age of 10 or else you're going to be a failure in life. Like, there's no way that you can do that when you wrap all your resources around kids and make sure that we as a community are taking care of them and that there's a path for them even if they're not excelling in school. They really value, that whole idea of valuing nature and being out in nature. Well, they aren't a stressed out people. And they live that out in their schools. So for every hour of learning, there's 15 minutes of that hour that is spent in recess, in breaking, in stopping, we talk about one of our core values is joy. Do we give enough time for joy to happen during the day? And yes, there's joy in learning. I want there to be joy in that learning. And I'm not saying that those things are separate, but do we stop enough to smell the roses, right? Do we stop and exercise? Do we take care of our full body? Do we take care of the full spirit of who we are? So this was a really, really, really challenging trip for me as I'm faced with so many questions about things that I'd like for us to do, but we can't just change that. We need to, as a society, want to embrace these ideas. I'm going ahead and skip Kristen. Fascinating, though, as glowing of things that I have to say, we really wrap a lot of things around kids where we don't have private schools, where they don't have private schools there, they do have privatized extracurriculars. In the high school, they don't have sports and clubs and all of those types of things. So I think we do an amazing job in our middle schools and our secondary schools of giving kids, as part of that free schooling environment, of really wrapping around and giving kids a chance to express themselves and fully participate, more so than we do. You can go on ahead. The matriculation exam is the first time in the career. So this is their entrance into college. This is the first time that they pay attention to testing. They don't test. They don't take, they participate in PISA, but they don't have standardized tests at the end of every year and do formative assessments to make sure that we're going to do well on these tests. In the end, it just comes down to that matriculation exam at the end of high school. I'm just going to talk over this kid. He's talking about the matriculation exam. The fascinating thing about that picture there, this kid who is just, he'll talk all day to you, super verbose. Maybe I need to chill down on my talking too. He was the least articulate one there, and articulation being defined as articulation in multiple languages. He's only trilingual. He only speaks English, Swedish, and Finnish. The girl on the left, on the far left, speaks 8 languages fluently. The girl next to her speaks 5 languages. The girl to the right of the gentleman talking speaks 6 languages. The girl to the right of her speaks 6 languages. You can go on ahead. Part of that trust and cooperation and community buy-in is the absolute professionalism that is accepted within the country of Finland for the teaching profession. Their teachers' college is highly, there's not space. There's not enough jobs for all the people that want to be teachers in Finland. There's not enough space for all the individuals that want to go to teachers' college in Finland. They have a 10% acceptance rate. To be a teacher in Finland, you have to have a master's degree. Principals are not evaluating their teachers. When we asked them, how do you know that they're doing? They said, you know. Of course you're going to know. If you've got a school full of kids that are not content, if you walk in a classroom and don't see joy, if you've got parents calling you, you know that your teachers aren't doing a good job, and then I'll talk to them. But I'm not going to spend my whole day running around going into classrooms evaluating teachers. Very different idea. That whole idea of test, 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 evaluate, 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 excellence, excellence, excellence. That's just not the way they operate there. Teacher pay is set at the national level, but negotiated at the municipalities. We happen to be there during a teacher strike. When we asked people on the street about the teacher strike, they were like, oh, well, that's what the teachers need to do. They'll be back. I mean, the teachers went on strike, but it's like, we're on strike, but we'll be back on Thursday. We just need to get this pay thing settled. And of course the pay was going to get settled because they value and love and respect their teachers. The teachers' colleges are also, there's a set number of universities. You have to go to one of like the 13 teachers' colleges in the country. And you do your student teaching at the school that's by the university. It's very much supported. So that teacher that's going through their student teaching experience will have like 2 or 3 teachers instead of supporting that one teacher in training. No turn and talk, no Kristen. So key points: trust, respect, equity over excellence, no dead ends. These things were beaten into our heads. It was a fascinating trip. Definitely feel blessed to have had the opportunity to go. I'm appreciative to this board in supporting me in being able to take this journey. And at the end of the school year, step away from the district for a couple weeks. But the lessons learned were huge. But don't expect us to just come in and do finished things. We've got some learning to do, some talking about it to do, and we really need to engage our community. We're never going to get to an aspiration like this without full community support for schools. We've got a long way to go in Arizona and this country.
So, fascinating presentation. Thank you for again doing this. This is a commitment. I'm sure it was an amazing experience as well. But thank you for making the trip. To almost halfway around the world. On this topic of community, my impression of the community in Osborne is that we probably would have support for some of these things. Maybe not at the state level, and we are constrained by the state, but have you had the opportunity to contemplate where within Osborne you can push to, and it's not even about Finland, right? I'm sure there are other countries with different ways that also have great things that is not necessarily the Finnish model. And as you mentioned, we have some pretty good ideas here, but given the strength, I think, of and the support for the district and the schools in our district, have you had the opportunity to contemplate?
Lots of thinking, and you know, we're starting the process, but I think the main way I'm going about things right now is asking questions to the team, starting with myself, just asking the questions and thinking to ask. So as we spent an hour today, we're going to spend 6 hours next week on evaluations, on principal evaluations, and we spent a lot of time talking about that today, juxtaposed with me making this presentation tonight. So as I'm thinking about that important work, and I think it's going to help us be better, that process, but how can I go into this evaluative process with a sense of trust in the individuals that are there? So that then becomes, how do I not make this a top-down process, but a working together process? And that trust part coming that the principals know what they need in order to grow, and so how can I be there to help support that? You know, really trying to look at, I can't overnight flip the system on its head, but how can I start asking those questions? There are some really important questions. The questions about play, about, you know, taking time to slow down, this idea of slow school they talked about there. We need to ask ourselves those questions about pacing guides. Man, I haven't even gone over this with teachers, with curriculum, but what are we doing to kids by pushing too hard? But there's also a huge sense of urgency with knowing what our kids need. So just because you ask questions doesn't mean that you're going to abandon anything from the old, but you're going to be brave enough to tackle having good, robust conversations around the question. So that's my approach, is questions.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing sort of more about that. Speaking for myself, the concept of moving away from excellence, as counterintuitive as that is for me, and kind of like how I've lived my life, being a parent, seeing my kids, I get that. That is a very eloquent way of expressing some of the frustration that I've had with the education system, and seeing my kids sort of go through it, and the pressure that, you know, 4th and 5th graders are feeling, and in many ways taking the joy out of school. So I appreciate that and look forward to hearing more about that. So thank you. Any other comments, questions?
It's a little bit reaffirming to hear these things. Through my teaching career, I've looked at these things from other countries, talked to people about, like, hey, how do you get your kids to learn? What helps them? And it's one of like, you're talking about equity, and one of the things I reinforce in my classes, I don't give you a grade. I have to, but I don't. I give you feedback. And the kids understand they're getting an A, but they're growing, which is what it sounds like they do over there based off what I've read, is they're more focused on, are you growing, rather than just exceeding at an A. So it's great to hear that. It's great to hear that these are conversations we're going to begin having here.
Thank you. Glad you enjoyed the trip, and glad I look forward to a lot of great ideas, and especially we talk about play, and I think I look forward to ways to kind of incorporate those ideas here at the district. So thank you.
Okay. Well, and thank you everyone for those great presentations. Going to some more kind of mundane business items.
Let's knock it out.
Oh wait, no, we have the admin reports.
Yeah, and principals are going to be submitting those new reports. I didn't ask them to submit a report because they've only been in school 6
Okay.
days.
Any questions about the admin reports?
Nope.
One observation that I want to make is I want to applaud the district for that conscious discipline training for the transportation team. Those are oftentimes the first, as it stated there, those are the first people they see every day. And this is a team effort. You know, I think the rhetoric often is about, the teacher's this, teacher's that. Not to take away from teachers, there's a lot of other people that make all of this happen. So I appreciate the time and energy spent with our transportation department. Now we go to action items. approval of first reading of ASBA policy revisions.
Yep, I'll try and make this as brief as possible. In 2020, legislation was approved in the state of Arizona. It was something that's referred to as Jake's Law. In that legislation, it required healthcare insurers to cover mental health without additional barriers. So access for parents to be able to use access for mental health in the same way that they're able to use access for physical health. So these policies are in reference to referrals in schools to mental health agencies. So schools don't have to make those referrals to behavioral health or mental health resources. But now if we're going to, 2 years later, there's these laws that have been introduced into statute saying that if school districts do make mental health referrals, there are certain things that you need to do. And that's what these policy revisions are. One says you have to have an opt-in process. Parents have to opt in to the idea of being referred for behavioral health. We've never been able to just give a child behavioral health services or psychological services without a parent intake, but now it's requiring that the parents be given an opt-in to even be referred these services.
Because I'm not sure I understand. So, because I've had a child who received services in the district,
Mm-hmm.
and it was it was a conversation. I think started with a teacher or an interventionist. So I'm not quite sure. Like,
Yeah.
but it
So
was me saying, like, yeah, let's
What
do
this
it.
is, so here's the deal. We want to be able to do this. We want to be able to partner with our local agencies and refer families for services. And a lot of times those services can happen right on our campus, or people can be referred out. There are a couple things that have to be put in place, and that's what these 3 policy revisions are. The first says we have to put in an opt-in. So that's very simple. At the beginning of the year, we send out, do you opt in to being referred for services or not?
Okay,
If a
so-
parent
so
opts
if-
out, then you can't even talk to them about, hey, we'd like for your kid to be able to take advantage of behavioral health services we have through Valle del Sol.
You can't offer it.
You cannot just offer it. No. You have to provide an opt-in. This is statute driven. This is not necessarily what we want.
Is that opt-in, let's say there's an opt-out in the beginning of the year and the parent changes, the parent's mind midway through the year. Is that possible? Or is it like?
Sure. When they opt in, that doesn't mean that you can automatically just send a child to the psychologist.
It's up to them to have the conversation.
Yes. It's an opt-in to, number one, be able to provide behavioral health services. The second thing it requires, I'm just going to go through what the requirements of these 3 policies are. Number one, there's the opt-in. Number 2, we have to have a listing on our website of all of the behavioral health providers that we would be making the recommendations to our families to. And the third thing is that there is a survey that parents need to take about what the process was like and what the favorability of their experience of working with that behavioral health service, and that survey gets turned into access at the end of the year.
And
If we do not adopt these, then we are no longer allowed as a district to offer behavioral health services within the district.
And the legislature must have appropriated a lot of money for us to comply with this mandate. No.
No.
Okay, I was kind of a joke, but
Yeah.
it's just another mandate from the legislature. So okay, well, thank you for explaining that. I wish there was some funding involved with it, but I appreciate the explanation.
From a funding perspective, like I agree with your comment, Ed. This is a kind of the work that's going to go in is the just putting it online, right? And then the opting in. But
Listen, there's a lot of factors that have to do with like Parents' Bill of Rights, right? That's what this is getting into, is that things are not being slipped in without fully bringing parents on board and a sense of public accountability.
But can we comply with the statute and provide services without approving these policies?
We cannot utilize the school as a means for making behavioral health recommendations for families and facilitating that process.
Even if we are doing exactly what's required. Like, so I have an issue with this approach. And even though it's the law and
You're not
legislature,
required to approve the policy, yet we have to comply with
Yeah,
the
exactly,
policy.
exactly. Like, obviously, I want there to be services provided, and we would opt in. We would ask parents to opt in. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being difficult about this, but it's the concept of acquiescing to this and then having this in our policy. This is us saying we agree with this because we have to follow the law, whether this is in our policy or not.
Yeah.
But do we have to affirmatively take a vote and say, yeah, we're going to put it in our policy and it's reflected as one of the things that we care about and value?
I think this is something where if we put it in our policy, it's going to look good on our end. But I get where you're coming from, and I'm all for malicious compliance.
Okay. All right.
So this is put there. I'm recommending that we approve the policies.
I at the end of the day, I can stomach it, but like
Yeah,
I
it's
think I'm upset with
the
the
legislature.
bigger issue, the larger picture, big picture that's happening here, rather than this. This is okay.
All of the unfunded mandates and lack of local control. I hear you 100%. Also very frustrated about that. With those frustrations expressed, I'm going to move that we approve the first reading of the ASBA policy revisions, JLDAB, JLDAB-R, JLDAB-E.
Motion's been made and seconded. Sorry, motion's been made. Any second?
All right, second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh. Aye.
Aye.
This is the first reading. We'll bring next month the second reading, so we're not going to put anything on our website. This gives us time now to start preparing the compliance steps.
Okay. Thank you very much. Approval, item B, approval of delegate and alternate as discussed to represent Osborne School District at the ASBA Delegate Assembly, September 10th, 2022. I am going to go out on a limb and say, Luis, don't you like doing this?
I like going to that assembly. That assembly was fun.
I
Listen, I'm going to be honest with y'all. As someone who's a strong supporter of public ed, who wants to support the arts, who wants to support, mental health in schools, the whole smorgasbord of things that students need, some of the other members of school boards in Arizona there were it hurt to hear them saying, like, we want to strip this thing. We don't want this. We don't want that. And I'm like, no. And so for me, it's like, I want to be there and fight for it. I didn't, it's just, yeah. No, I want to go.
I'd like to nominate Board Member Luis Peralta as the delegate. Would love the fire to serve at the Delegate Assembly on September 10th, 2022.
Okay. We need an alternate as well. That's a Saturday, September 10th. And if you want to do it,
Are you interested, Juan Carlos?
I'll do it if no one else wants to do it.
I'd like to nominate Juan Carlos as the alternate to be the alternate at the Delegate Assembly on September 10th, 2022.
I would like to note, though, when I was there last year, the alternates can still show up if you would like to. And actually, if you wanted to switch off, if you see something you want to speak on, we can switch off throughout there. You can sit in the back. And it's actually, like I said, some other people get passionate too. I don't want to say it's fun, but it's fun to watch, people get passionate.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and okay. Yeah, motion's been made to have Luis as the delegate and myself as the alternate on September 10th. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. It'll be fun.
Want me to whip us through this last one?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so this is, in the last meeting or some meeting in the spring, you guys approved your items for the delegate assembly. They've convened, they've put those all together. This is a draft of ASBA's 2023 political agenda. And so you're going to, with approval, direct your delegate to represent the governing board's position that you guys brought to this document.
Any need to discuss?
No, I move that we approve the ASBA draft 2023 political agenda, and that we direct our delegate, Mr. Peralta, and as necessary, our alternate, Mr. Flamand, to the ASBA Delegate Assembly to represent the board's determined position.
Any second? Second. All right, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Motion carries. Perfect. That's it for the action items. Yeah, with the start of the new year, I am grateful that we are in a much better place when it comes to COVID and the precautions and protocols needed. But seems like an opportune time to just give an overview of kind of what we're envisioning for this year. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Robert.
Sure. As I mentioned in my kind of 3 to 5 minute video that went to members of the community as well as parents about general COVID overview. Since then, the CDC has loosened guidelines. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what those loosened guidelines are, because they're pretty much in line with a lot of how things are within the district. One thing that I did speak to with parents is in terms of practices, we're going to try our best to keep the community appraised of the current levels of county spread and infection. That's on the CDC county tracker map. That's got that red, yellow, green. Red for areas of high spread, yellow for moderate, green for low spread. Back when I did the video, we were at a high level, but since then, over the past 2 weeks, and this new, the website's updated every Thursday. So we've been in low spread for Maricopa County and most of Arizona over the past couple weeks. There's still a couple counties that are in the red or the yellow, but the low spread is pervasive over much of Arizona and about half of the country itself right now. Doesn't mean that we're out of this pandemic, and we've seen infection, within our schools with staff members, and some cases have been a little bit more symptomatic than others. So we wish those that are experiencing more symptoms, well out there and quick healing. But the look of the CDC with the change in the mitigation strategies as a nation is looking at high levels of population immunity due to vaccination, as well as previous infection, and the numerous tools that are available within the community and to the general population, mainly through vaccines and boosters. And protecting people at higher risk allows the CDC to focus on protecting people from serious illness from COVID. That's the real public health goal right now, is protecting people from serious illness from COVID, not preventing people from getting COVID. We have the resources for having vaccines, as well as most of the population has some level of antibodies, whether through having been previously infected or due to vaccination. So the current CDC recommendations, there are some changes. One change through the CDC's recommendation is the end of 6-foot social distancing requirements. Contact tracing as a practice, the CDC is recommending that be limited to hospitals and high-risk group living situations, such as elderly care facilities. De-emphasizes the need for regular testing to screen for COVID. We have had regular testing within our schools with the pool testing that's been done on a weekly basis. We opted into that last year, starting, I believe, in December, somewhere around there, and continued throughout the end of the year. The threshold for that being an effective use of time and space and everything within the school is a 30% participation threshold. We haven't come close to that yet in the signups that parents have had the opportunity. Abby, I see you agreeing with me. I think the highest number was somewhere around like 10 or 12% maybe at one of the schools. Yeah, so the idea of continuing with pool testing, we were only going to put in the continuation of pool testing if we hit that 30% threshold, and we haven't hit that. We haven't come close to hitting that in any of our schools. The idea of quarantine or the isolation. Of course, isolation still happens for individuals that have COVID, but the CDC is de-emphasizing or saying that there's no quarantine necessary if you've been exposed to COVID, but you're not infected. So basically, there's no need for any type of quarantine with only exposure. Some things that the CDC kept the same was the recommendation of testing if you have symptoms. The recommendation of isolating for 5 days after testing positive and masking for 10 days. And the recommendation to wear masks indoors if you're in an area of high spread or infection. Like I mentioned earlier, it was about 50%. I think at the last Thursday, nationwide, we're at about 41% of counties in the country that were at high levels. So only, that recommendation is, it's choice. It's not, there's no mandate that we can have within the schools around masking. Any questions about things moving forward?
And as we sit here today, the county, are we green, yellow?
Yes, we're green.
We're green, that's right.
And we have been for the past couple weeks. We'll get every Thursday as an update. If we move from that green, we're going to notify the community if there's been an increase in community spread, and also we'd notify the community when that spread happens. Haven't figured out exactly how. I don't know that a weekly robocall is quite the mechanism for doing that. We may want to have it on the website, or maybe utilizing social media for putting out that just trying to figure out the best method. I don't want to overuse robocall because once you start over inundating people, they'll stop paying attention to the robocalls. So I want it to be, if you got something to say, then listen up. But if you talk too much.
Thoughts on, I think this past summer we finally got younger kids, really younger kids available to have the vaccine. My 4-year-old got it, I think, this past summer. And now we have boosters and all that kind of stuff. And any thoughts about doing another vaccine/booster clinic?
Yes. So the first means that I utilized for doing that was Phoenix Union as a larger, because they have many schools within all, just working within this Phoenix Public Schools collaborative that we've been engaged in for the past couple years of our 14 elementary school districts here within the city of Phoenix. Phoenix Union has a school pretty much in every one of these elementary district locations. So our first drive that I was able to notify folks about were the 2 weekends that were at Metro Tech. So I'm starting with Phoenix Union and seeing if they're having any drives, at North, at Central, at Metro Tech. They don't have any. So we've got our friends at Native Health that we could go back to and see if they could do a vaccine drive at one of our schools. So I'm engaging in those conversations, but also continuing to engage Phoenix Union.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Any feedback or comments from the staff on your proposed outline proposed sort of vision of COVID protocols this year?
Yeah, so we did have a more toned down. It wasn't the robust like we did back in the summer of 2020 with getting a task force together. But did call some individuals that were part of that task force to be part of, our figuring out our back to school safe plan that's there. I haven't heard gotten any feedback specifically directed to me about the protocols that we have within schools. But the one thing that I can say is there's not anything that is outside of practice that any of our neighboring districts are doing. Probably the only thing that differs is in terms of benefit of what we've been able to offer, continuing with the COVID pay and front loading the annual leave days. Quite frankly, those are practices that aren't happening in other districts, and so I think that we have probably the most robust benefit in terms of mitigation. Not mitigation, but in terms of what we're able to offer employees.
Something that developed, if I recall correctly, at the beginning was the implementation or the use of partitions in the district office and the offices of the different campuses. And I recall back in the day when we're talking about the construction work we were planning on for the bond money, that was a topic of concern to the board at that point.
Yes.
And now that COVID concerns have waned, I'd be interested in kind of hearing the administration's sort of perspective on it, not necessarily now, but I don't want to get too far afield from the topic, but just that was a COVID precaution. Do we take it down? And there are reasons to keep it. So, but that can be perhaps for a future agenda item or discussion.
It can be a future agenda item, but I will happily give you my 5-second, which will probably turn into a 45-second response to that is, if you want input from staff on that, you should ask for it and start with the people that sit immediately behind it, because it's not just a COVID precaution. It was originally brought as a school safety precaution that was chosen to not go up. COVID allowed us to put that that glass up, and it served two purposes, but our front offices, especially post Uvalde, are not feeling comfortable with the idea of taking that barrier down.
And I recall there was a very contentious discussion. I am interested in hearing the perspective. I know it was important. I think it's warrants a conversation, but in the spirit of trusting the professionals that work here, I think it's just, I know the history of that, and I think it's worth discussing.
Yeah, and if I may, President Juan Carlos Flamand, I was part of that conversation too, and I think and I'm also now, an Canto parent of two, and I spoke with quite a few parents this week of Canto kids who Uvalde is on people's minds, and just the tragedies on people's minds. So school safety is on people's minds, and they're. I completely agree with what you said, Dr. Robert. I mean, I think that's now the main purpose of that now is that school safety aspect and kind of creating a more controlled, not closed off to parents, but more of a controlled point there. I think it's important, and that's kind of a different evolved viewpoint from what I had from the years ago discussion that we had on
And
this
getting the
topic.
perspective of school district employees will be a really good thing. So I think the format of a work study session would be a great forum for engaging in that conversation.
And I think we're probably skating a little bit close to the line here, but that also reminds me of the request to have a
Executive
briefing
Yes.
on security measures. Yep.
We will do that hopefully at an executive session in September.
All right. Cool. Thank you for the update. And for item number 9, board development, I'll leave it up to the board members to notify Lisa if they're interested in participating in that.
Yes, but on the actual, it's not on the agenda, but it is on the agenda as presented for board development, and on the board page is listed for Mr. Peralta to present the information learned at the ASBA ASA Summer
Oh.
Leadership Conference.
Yes.
So I don't want to take up too much of your time, so some of this I will bring up as future board agenda items. I'm going to separate it, mainly because we had 7:30. I know we have an executive session after this. I think the big thing I want to take away right now that I do want to bring up is how we start thinking about getting the information we have. Because I've heard a lot of today is we want feedback from the community. We want to hear what they think. School safety, COVID, everything that's going on, we want to hear feedback from our community, not just our staff members, but parents and families as well. And one thing that we talked about at the summer leadership is how are we getting that information from our community, and also how are we getting back the information we get to them. And there's a couple things I want to bring up there because this is comes from Nikki Whaley over in Washington Elementary, great lady. What are we doing right now? What's the right tool for our job to get this information we need? If we're talking about school safety, are we just going to send out another Google form? Are we going to use a robocall to have teachers, or not teachers, family members, community members talk to us? What are we doing? And how are we picking the right tool for the job? When we were looking at the survey, Paul Whalen, I think was his name was, or Euland did, for our bond override, I was fine with it, but also felt like we didn't get a large enough sample size, that we didn't hear from enough people. I was interested in hearing what he did to get that information. And I think one thing we can start thinking about as a district is how are we going to survey our families? How are we going to talk to them? I think sometimes Google Form may be inaccessible. There's other tools out there we can use that allows for a more direct conversation from our community members amongst each other as well. One thing we use in Scottsdale is called a thought exchange, where you will put up a topic. Dr. Robert can put up a topic, and parents can submit anonymously, which might be an issue, what they feel. We had one about SROs. A lot of parents, it was actually pretty divided on SROs in Scottsdale, but the thing was, is it allowed Dr. Menzel to get feedback. It allowed teachers to see what other people were seeing. It allowed the public, other families to see what other people were feeling, and it allowed for better conversation. That's just one tool, and that's one big thing. Are we doing focus groups? Are we pulling parents and families in and having those nights where we talk to them? Work study is great, but I feel like we could do better if we offered those town hall nights to try to pull those parents in. I mean, it's hard knowing our population, knowing the parents we have, but the better we can get those parents in to get that data we need, and then I think what we're doing is we're doing good and getting it out there, but I think we can do better to get better data, if that makes sense. I mean, that also is going to help us with the issue we have always talked about with marketing. How do we grow the district? We're stuck in these confines, but how do we pull more people in? And I think a lot of it comes down to is how we're getting the data from the families, how they see the district, and how we're putting that data right back out there. That's the big one. Then the other two I'm going to bring up as other or future board items is talking about ACEs, how we're looking at our students who have ACEs as well as foster youth. Those were two of the big things that were hit on the entire weekend I was in Flagstaff for the Leadership Institute, was working with your students who have those mental health issues, those behavioral health issues, as well as students who are maybe in the foster care system, and how are we aiding them. But I mean, that comes back to that, the first reading we just had, which is rough at the same time when we talk about it. But I will bring those two up as future agenda items, just so we have more time to discuss it.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for your service. Like, I deeply appreciate, your passion on going out there and interacting with our fellow colleagues, board members around the state and professionals to bring back some of that information.
I'm not gonna lie, I was sitting at a table with Dr. Menzel from my district I work in. It was a little bit weird the whole time. I was like, how much am I supposed to be hearing from them? They're talking about district stuff, and I'm just a teacher. Should I be hearing this right now? And then, turning around and seeing your superintendent looking at you as you're just having a quick adult beverage, and you're like, oh, I mean, we're allowed to right now, but this is weird. It was fun, though.
And again, as President Flamon mentioned, the law conference is coming up. So if you have an interest, please send an email to Lisa.
Starting with you, Luis, any thoughts or reflections on the meeting?
It was really nice to see the new teachers. I remember being there, 7 years ago now. It's sometimes a little bit daunting, either if you're coming from a new district or it's your first teaching job, it's daunting. But it's awesome that they come here to us and we get to see them, at least most of them. I love that. oh no, it's nice to see them like, hey, you're coming in at a really rough time in education, but we're going to support you. And I know the district does. This is one thing our district does great is we support new teachers really well.
Sue?
I think our teachers that we have, the current ones, are fantastic. We've got a great bunch of teachers, and the brand new ones that are coming in are right with us, I think. I think it's just going to be a real positive addition to our district.
I agree. Just so wonderful to see the new teachers come in and just excited and get going. Hopefully it's invigorating for our returning teachers and returning staff, and it's certainly invigorating for the students, no doubt. It's just great to see everybody back after summer. It was so fun to come onto campus and see all the kids and parents on the first day of school, and just appreciate what everybody's done to make this a wonderful, welcoming district, and to help us spread that joy to more families.
I guess two observations. One is the first meeting of the school year. It's a time of sort of hope and promise, and I it's an exciting time, and I look forward to an amazing school year. Then two, with the teachers, I assume that everyone's competent and qualified and that sort of thing. So, amazing job in the recruitment. The thing that struck me was I want to commend the district on and I'm gonna make assumptions here about what I saw, but we had a very diverse representative cross section of society in front of us, and I think that it probably reflects our student body very well. So again, I want to commend the district for that.
I've done a lot of talking, so I'm kind of talked out for the night. But great first meeting. It's always wonderful to see the smiles and energy of new teachers. I think that was a big focus, and also the opportunity. I'm grateful, and as you heard from some teachers, of the opportunity to be ambassadors for the district and stepping out. We're very appreciative to this board for supporting that type of professional learning.
Okay. Yelenia, I don't know, do you have any general observations?
So this is the reflection part.
Yes.
I was really happy to hear all the excitement since I can't really be there, but I'm here to feel the energy, so that was always great. And then hearing about Dr. Robert's trip, like that was also something that I think, as a board, we should be really proud of to hear that our leaders participating in professional development and bringing all the knowledge and experience back to our district. So I was really excited to hear that part as well. And then just hearing really, be active in the community with other board members, just hearing reflections. That's it.
Thank you. Future agenda items, Luis?
So I do want to revisit data collection for the district. How are we getting those surveys? Whether it be, update email where we talk about it as a board meeting. I want to revisit, or I want to review our ACEs procedures, how our behaviors texts are getting ACE scores from students. How can we better, get a bigger sample size of students to see their ACE scores, which is adverse childhood experiences. And I'll talk a little bit about that more later. And then as well as the foster care for our students in the foster care system.
Can you just, what specifically you're looking for in terms of foster care system?
Oh, actually, I'm going to forward it to you. There is a worksheet that I could not access before, now I can access, that I want to look over for the district as a whole, and it's just asking how many students we have. It's more one that we filled out and we use for feedback that comes from the Leadership Summit.
Sue?
Two things. One, would love to kind of a semi-comprehensive report on ESSER, how much money we've got left. Sooner rather than later, get that allocated out there, promised. I read about both here in our district and statewide, really nationwide, the difficulty filling vacancies and difficulty hiring folks. Would love to, we still have ESSER money, would love to get that out there, get some, maybe bonuses out there, at least in the future, so people can have something to look forward to. But to start having those discussions, but really kind of know where we're at, how much money we have left, how much more time we have left to allocate that, and get those promises out there. Second thing is enrollment. The numbers are coming in now. Look at enrollment on a school-by-school basis, kind of in a historical basis of the last couple of years. Take stock of where we're at and what we can be doing to improve.
Yeleni?
Ed covered my two items, but good on that moment, like, wanting to know whether we have like extension time or whether we could afford any future enrollment and but nothing else.
The conversation about the services made me think about my experience with getting services through the district, which there are some issues. I'm interested in probably more of an email, but just I don't know if there's a way to measure sort of performance, from our mental health provider. The experience I had was one of providers switching a lot, lack of consistency, lack of just, it was not a very effective model. So it didn't work for us. So we moved on to other things. But it conversation reminded me of like, oh yeah, so just be interested in seeing, do we track that? Do we measure that? Do we have a sense for, are students getting value out of that? That's it. All right, that is it for the public meeting. We will go into, we need a motion, but there will be a discussion about the superintendent's evaluation, which is in executive session. So we'll take a minute here to recess, and people can say their good nights, and then we'll move on to executive session. That's good.